I am Christina Strasburger, pronouns she and her, co-founder of the Queer Newark Oral History Project. And on behalf of the team, welcome to the LGBTQ Educators Panel Discussion. Tonight's event is made possible thanks to a grant from the New Jersey Council for the Humanities. And we are so encouraged to see such a strong interest in this important topic and are glad to have you with us today. We have an incredible group of speakers, and since we want to engage them as much as the time allows, I'm going to share only a few housekeeping notes and a brief overview about our project. First, closed captioning is enabled. Click on the live transcript or CC button on the bottom of your screen to view subtitles or a full transcript. The session is being recorded for our archive and will be made available on our website, queer.newark.rutgers.edu, and on our YouTube channel. So if you're not following us, please go ahead and do that at Queer Newark everywhere. Your microphone and camera are muted as this is a webinar. We will be monitoring the chat for questions and comments, so please feel free to respectfully engage there. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Queer Newark Oral History Project, we're a community and university partnership founded in 2011 by writer, scholar, activist Darnell Moore, Rutgers Newark historian Burl Satter, and me. We're dedicated to collecting and preserving the history of LGBTQ and gender not conforming communities right here in Newark. A series of discussions with LGBTQ activists, church leaders, educators, and students made evident then that there was a need for the preservation and cross-generational sharing of local queer history and knowledge. We deemed it critical for youth to have access to this history, considering how the AIDS crisis wiped out a generation, leaving them with few people to turn to for guidance and mentorship. To date, we have collected over 100 interviews with the LGBTQ residents of Newark. We've sponsored and collaborate on public programs, conduct academic research. We have a book coming out next year, shameless plug, and contribute to a publicly accessible archive of oral history interviews and material culture about the history of LGBTQ+ in Newark. Furthermore, we are gathered here because of the importance of making sure our youth have access to this information, make sure our educators are supported. Our archive is one way of helping those to tell the stories that are so important to our education. So with that, I promised I would be brief, so I'm gonna turn this over to our incredible moderator, Kristyn Scorsone. I've had the pleasure to know Kristyn for over a decade, as they are a double alum of our history program here at Rutgers Newark and a current PhD candidate in the American Studies program right here at Rutgers University, Newark. They study LGBTQ+ history, African-American women's history, urban history, and public history. They're a volunteer manager for our Queer Newark project, and their forthcoming dissertation, A Way Out of No Way, the labor and activism of Black, queer, and transgender women in Newark, New Jersey, draws extensively on their research with the Queer Newark Oral History Project. They examine Black, queer, and transgender women's labor and related activism in Newark from the 70s to the present. They've conducted over 24 oral histories, given numerous talks and workshops, interviews, presentations, and designed and co-led the Queer Newark Walking Tour, of which we will do another one during Newark Pride next month in July. Links will be in the chat. They also curated the 2017 traveling exhibit At Home in Newark, Stories from the Queer Newark Oral History Project, and produced and hosted the Queer Newark podcast. So if that wasn't enough, their writing has appeared in the Public Historian, History at Work, Notches, Out History, Out in New Jersey, and Los Angeles Music Blog. They'll also have a chapter in that forthcoming anthology, Queer Newark, Stories of Resistance, Love, and Community. They are available as a consultant for educators regarding using our Queer Newark project as a diverse historical resource to meet the New Jersey's LGBTQ+ curriculum requirement. And with that, let me turn the floor over to Kristyn to introduce our incredible speakers with my deep thanks to all of you. And let's start.
First off, thank you, Christina, and thanks to Christina, who's the heart of Queer Newark Oral History Project and one of our founders. And thank you everyone that's joining us today. It's really cool to see so many people here to be in conversation with us. And thank you to all of our participants, our panelists. it's, you know, so appreciated that you're here, that we're talking about this, because I think this conversation is really, really necessary. So with that, let me just introduce everybody, and everybody has amazing bios. So I'm going to go through this now, but like I might miss some stuff, and just know there's like a million things that can be said about these folks that are super, super accomplished and super great people. So Reginald Bledsoe is the director of the Essex County Office of LGBTQ plus Affairs, one of 2 offices in the state of New Jersey. He worked in Governor Phil Murphy's administration for 4 years, starting with the New Jersey Department of Education before transitioning to the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs. He also worked as a legislative aide to Essex County Commissioner President Wayne Richardson and former freeholder President Bonnie Watson. He currently serves as a member of the New Jersey Performing Arts Center's LGBTQ plus Advisory Council. Born and raised in Newark, graduated from Essex County Newark Tech, elected as the youngest Democratic district leader in District 5 of Newark Central Ward, and is serving as a member of the Newark Board of Education. Well, he did that from 2017 to 2020, and also received an Essex County Pride Award from Joe DiVincenzo Jr. in 2017, and has won numerous community awards. Melissa Mott, they them pronouns, develops LGBTQ history curriculum and training as the founder of We Are History, which focuses on local-based LGBTQ plus history education, and is the director for Echoes and Reflections, a genocide education program. They're a former 10th grade English teacher in Newark's public schools, and a Fulbright scholar in Poland. Melissa studies the intersection of history education, collective memory, and anti-democratic thought, and has written curriculum and programs and trained educators on genocide pedagogy, inquiry learning, human rights, LGBTQ plus history in numerous places. And it's just, I mean, an incredible person, incredible scholar, and incredible teacher. Alex Rosado-Torres is a lifelong Newark native. He, they pronouns. They're a product of the Newark Public Schools and have since earned a BA in history from Rutgers University, New Brunswick, and an master's in education policy from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. He is currently working toward his PhD in the history of education and queer studies, where his research is focused on exploring the history of LGBTQ plus teacher and student activism, with special interest in the experiences of BIPOC queer folks. They're often using art-based and oral history methodology to approach their research and teaching. Danielle Scott teaches 10th through 12th grade high school in the Academy of the Arts, Snyder High School, is an amazing mixed media assemblage artist who grew up in Jersey City. Her work expresses politically and socially charged messaging, and she recently received the 2021 Artist of the Year from ESKFF, which is the Eileen S. Kaminsky Family Foundation Artist Residency Program in Mana Contemporary. They were also featured in the 2021 Essex Magazine as one of the top LGBTQ artists to look out for. And her works were recently acquired by the New York Museum of Art in 2021. Roxane Gay, New York City Times best-selling author, and the Wiseman Family Collection. She's soft-spoken, but has begun to use her art as a conduit to explore bold, fearless, thought-provoking work, and draws her inspiration largely from her own journey and life experience. And Lana Vercellino is a recent 2021 graduate of Rutgers Newark University and NJIT with a Bachelor of Arts and Science in History, minoring in urban education. Currently, Lana teaches high school students in the girls division at St. Benedict's Preparatory School. As a Newark native, Lana has revolved their work to serve their community through radicalizing educational structures, equipping young women of color with the necessary skills towards success, and forging access and education for food justice with the Price Institute. In their free time, Lana also enjoys rock climbing, that's pretty badass, plant identification, also badass, and outdoor sports. Okay. This is great. We have so many great people. So first off, I want to invite each of you to, just like briefly share how you came into education and whatever role you are in, or talk about whatever your current role is now. Melissa, do you want to start? Oh, sorry.
No, I love that. Sure, definitely. I'll start. Why not? So first I'll say, like, I'm very honored to be here with all of you wonderful educators and everyone who is doing like the work. Thank you very much for having me, Kristyn and Christina. So yeah, I'm a former teacher in Newark Public Schools at Eastside High. Lana was actually my former student, which we discovered shortly before on the call. And right now I have two different lives, one of which is where I work on LGBTQ history with We Are History, which I founded and I lead as a consultant, wonderful group of educators that I work with, helping me in districts throughout the nation, but especially in New York and New Jersey. We develop locally focused queer history curriculum. Then we train teachers, admins, support staff, sometimes do parent interventions, et cetera. Anything you can really think of. We are sort of the resupply trenches is what we think about ourselves as. And then in my second life, as Kristyn said, I run a genocide education program. And yeah, I guess I came into this work. I'm a third generation New Jersey public school teacher. So I don't know that I had a choice in the matter at that point. And I was raised by a science teacher who deeply believed in experiential learning. And that's what sort of has always brought me to queer history, the discovery of local LGBTQ histories that were sort of hidden in plain sight, sometimes even within our own families, our own neighborhoods, and seeing how these sort of local micro histories are often intersectional and illuminate the experiences of various people and connect to bigger narratives. So really, that's how I got here, I guess. Thanks, Kristyn.
That's awesome. Danielle, do you want to share how you came into education?
Sure. I actually attended Arts High School in Newark, New Jersey. I graduated 1997. When I started at Arts High School in Newark, New Jersey, my principal at the time was the late Elita Caldwell. And Miss Caldwell at that time took me underneath her wing and she introduced me to the late Gladys Barker Grauer, who became my mentor for over 26 years. And also Bisa Washington, Ben Jones, Willie Cole, and a few other, just to name some names. With that leadership from Arts High School, from Alita Caldwell and my mentors, I decided that I was going to pursue becoming an art teacher, knowing that my career as an artist might not be the way to provide for myself. So I attended School of Visual Arts in New York. My mentor there was the late Jack Winton, who is a well-known, very famous artist, along with the other artists that I have named already. When I attended School of Visual Arts, I studied fine arts, art therapy, and art education. So I'm a certified art therapist and a certified art teacher. I've been teaching for about 21 years at Henry Snyder High School, which is the Academy of the Arts in Jersey City. I am from Jersey City, and I chose to teach here and not in New York City because my elementary school art teacher from Jersey City is the one that realized that I had a talent. And she pulled me into a classroom instead of me being that child who did all the work, had ADHD, would beat up other people, and said, I want you to sit down and draw. So I decided to become an art teacher. And I absolutely love it. I love high school students. I love my relationships with them. Over 21 years in this building, I'm known as Mama Scott. I've taken in a lot of students. I've actually adopted one out of the 21 years, but I have a deep-rooted relationship with the LGBT students in this building. I started one of the first or the only GSA in the high schools in Jersey City. And then my daughter, when she was in second grade, started a GSA in her charter school in Jersey City because her best friend in second grade was non-binary. So that's a little bit about myself.
That is really, really great. I love that. Reggie, how about yourself being here on the political side of things?
Definitely. So first, I just would like to say thank you to you, Kristyn and Christina, and the Newark Oral History Project for hosting an important discussion and actually giving LGBTQ individuals the opportunity to express our experiences and our stories. That's so important. A little bit about me, similar to what Danielle mentioned. I was born and raised in the city of Newark. How I got into education is basically being a student. At the time, when I was 5 years old, in 1995, the state of New Jersey took over the Newark school system. So from 95 all the way up until about 2015, 2005, excuse me, my entire education was performed under a state controlled district. And unfortunately, at the time, the quality of education was not good at all. And a lot of students were being educated in schools that have failed generations of children. So for me, I was educated Quitman Street School. I attended Morton Street Middle and then went on to Newark Tech High School. And attending Newark Tech, my principal at the time, Rudy Kafele, instilled in me the importance of education and just the importance of actually doing what's right for your community and improving the lives of people that live beside you or next door to you. And at that time, I had the opportunity to graduate from there, attended Cheney University. And again, it reinforced the importance of knowing my history, the African-American story in America and our struggles. And from there, I had the opportunity to attend Montclair State University, where again, I got the opportunity to serve in various positions. During that time, I was approached because at the time I was very involved in my community politically. I was approached by then South Ward Councilman Ras Baraka. He asked me to run for the school board at the age of 24. I never thought that I would be running for a position such as that. And then, you know, that election, we were unsuccessful by 55 votes. And then 3 years later, I was asked again to run a coalition of elected officials in the city, said that we believe that your perspective is needed on the school board, being a student that was educated entirely under a state operated district. And we won in 2017. And one thing I would say is that most of the time, young politicals, they go into politics thinking that the school board is what will start off their political career. And unfortunately, when I got there, that was the mindset that I had. And since I've served, that mindset actually shifted. And when you start to see curriculum that you're voting on and textbooks that are actually being given to our students, and you're improving the conditions of school buildings, and you're seeing a lot of the activities that our kids are participating in, that shifted. And I said, you know what, this is just not political. This is actually life-changing work. And being a policymaker at the school board level is very important. And, you know, I fell in love with it. And unfortunately, you know, I didn't get the opportunity to run again because I was approached by the Murphy administration to come and do a lot of work at the state level in education. And, you know, I felt that was rewarding. So that's how I got into education. It's a little different than some of the educators on the panel, but I think that that lens and that perspective is important because what happens in the classrooms and what teachers can do and say, it starts at that board table.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so, so important and so interesting. Lana, do you want to share, and then Alex?
Yep. I want to echo everybody's thanks first and foremost to thank Kristyn and Christina just for hosting this. It's incredible to see this moving forward and having conversations like this, which is so important. So hello, I'm Lana Vercellino. I am a recent graduate of Rutgers Newark. How I got into education, school for me was always a second home. Growing up as a Newark native in the inner city, mom and dad were never home. They were always working or doing other things. So home for me was definitely a second home. That's where I created a lot of bonds with my teachers and fellow classmates, and what really began to mold me as a person. It wasn't until maybe my high school year where I had my freshman math teacher, Miss Leone, pull me aside and say, hey, I want you to get involved in this extracurricular activity. It was in partnership with Teach for America. And we would essentially go to schools and teach mini lessons for the day to younger classes and sometimes even high school students, same as our age. I didn't realize from such an early age how invested and how connected education was for me growing up. after I graduated from high school and I went to Rutgers Newark with Alex. Actually, we were a part of the Rutgers Future Scholars program together. That pathway for me in terms of education began to really solidify itself as I began to think about how I'm going to move forward in my life, but also pay back to my community. I have always had this deep connection to Newark. And I definitely felt called in terms of my natural connection to the classroom and creating communities and holding spaces for people that felt the same as me growing up. So yeah, I joined UTEP, which is Urban Teacher Education Program at Rutgers Newark, my sophomore year. I was a part of educational spheres for some time, whether it was like mentorship programs or nonprofit organizations. I did some work with Sadie Nash in Newark and then also New York, and Rutgers Future Scholars as well. I served as an instructor and a mentor as well. So it's been a slow, gradual buildup. Currently, I am a teacher at St. Benedict's Prep, like was mentioned. I just completed my first year of teaching, which was definitely a whirlwind coming out of COVID and all of that. But I love the classroom. I think similar to what Reggie said, it really starts with the teachers. Not only are we teachers, but similar to like what Danielle said, we're parents in many senses of the form. We're also activists, we're politicians, and teachers kind of just do so much. So to have conversations regarding LGBTQ plus history and the inclusion of it in curriculum is first and foremost, only because it connects to me and my history and my background as well. But more importantly, where Newark and other major cities are going to be moving forward. It's definitely necessary to have these conversations. So thank you everyone for having me.
Reggie, did you put your hand up? Did you want to say something about what Lana was talking about?
Yes, Lana, thank you. I just wanted to note that just for the panel, like teachers are actually the inspiration behind every other profession. So I just wanted to put that out there because what you just said around, you know, politicians, activists, that comes from the classroom first. So.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. All of everyone that inspired me as a kid was definitely at Franklin School, grammar school in my hometown of Kearney, and then Kearney High. Alex, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everyone. I will save time and echo what everyone said about being here. Super grateful. Like Danielle, I am an alumni of Arts High School, and I love Arts High School. I think that is where I really learned to come into myself, especially as an LGBTQ person. And from that point on, I felt like my life shifted by having the arts integrated into my schooling experience, but also being in a space where being LGBT was celebrated and was brought to the forefront of my, young experience in Newark, right? Especially as someone who was born and raised in the South Ward of Newark. I would say that, like Lana mentioned, we both did the Rutgers Future Scholars Program together, and alongside my public school education, I think that resource, learning more, right, having the access to other alternative histories. I remember we took social justice classes in like 7th and 8th grade, right? And it was those conversations that for me really opened my eyes to the possibility of what education could be. Because up until that point, I had learned a very whitewashed history. I had learned a very, fundamentalist and traditionalist history. And I was like, well, I don't see myself in that. I don't see my friends in that. I don't see my family in that history, right? And so for me, I was like, well, what can I do about that? And so that's why I decided to go down sort of the history of education path. And so I spent time teaching for a little bit in Philadelphia. I've also spent time working with nonprofits, doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work, figuring out how can we incorporate social justice conversations into educational spaces and make them truly fundamental to the educational experience. At the moment, I'm a PhD student. I'm working on an oral history project where I'm doing a national search for LGBTQ teachers of color to document our stories, document our histories through oral history interviews. And for me, I view oral history as an art form. It is indeed storytelling. And so I see history work as a form of storytelling and expression. I also work with the Human Rights Campaign through the Welcoming Schools program as a national facilitator, where I go into school districts and I help teachers, learn what it means to create a gender inclusive school, learn how to celebrate diverse families. And so I'm super excited to be here and I can't wait to get the conversation started.
Thank you all. I guess so I wanted to ask you sort of like kind of a broad question, but like, how do you explain why LGBTQ plus history and like including contributions of LGBTQ plus folks in our country is important? Like why, how do you convince parents or other teachers that this is important, or why does it matter? Especially people that don't see it as being meaningful to students that aren't LGBTQ. And you all, if you want to jump in, whoever wants to jump in is fine.
I can kind of answer. When I first started teaching at Snyder, we had a huge population in Jersey City or in the school system of LGBT students. But those students, because they weren't being respected, there became a lot of fights. There was a lot of fights in the building. And then I saw the need to start something that would make them feel safe. And, I wasn't so much concerned about creating safe spaces, safe space classrooms. I wanted to create a safe space within my classroom for those students first. So I started there. But I've explained before, like doing that, I took a risk. As a teacher, as an openly out lesbian, I took a risk because I, never really spoke about my partner or whomever I was with. But when I did become the GSA advisor, a lot of teachers were asking, like, are you doing this because you're gay? So, I mean, for me, I have nothing to hide. I was raised by two lesbian moms my parents been together for 35 years. So I'm not going to hide that. So I took on the Gay Straight Alliance. It was filled with gay students and also straight. A lot of my straight students had parents that were, in same-sex relationships as well, which is what was so welcoming. They also had siblings that needed a place to come to where they can talk. And their siblings happened to be siblings that were in elementary schools that came into the high school to receive this help. So with that, it was very important that we started this in the building with the GSA. And then from there, we created safe spaces where the Hudson Pride Connection Center of Jersey City came into Snyder High School and did safe space training for teachers so that teachers understood what they should and should not say to a student in a classroom, or the words that they should not use in a classroom, not knowing if their students were of the LGBT community. From there, we grew relationships with NJCU. A very good friend of mine, Renata, was there for a long time. We raised flags over there with her, and then we joined the college GSA, which came over to Henry Snyder High School. So it's very important that we push this in the school systems. I do know now in the school systems that LGBT history, LGBT stories are being told in the history departments, but that it's not being told throughout every curriculum in our building. We raised the flag last week in front of our building, which was very important to me. It hasn't been done in the last 10 years. So we did raise the flag. We celebrated Pride Week with different activities. So parents haven't said much about it because it became a point where Snyder High School was known as the gay school because I was the advisor who was bringing the transgender students, as what they were saying at that time, to prom. And then I got the flag and the hate mails and all that other stuff, which I frankly didn't care. I just wanted my students to feel accepted. So outside of our regular prom, we started doing gay proms because we had enough with the discrimination that was happening within the public schools when it came to the LGBT community. So we kind of forced it in so that we made room for our LGBT students to be accepted, and also the teachers. Then finally, teachers felt comfortable with the movement that was happening from the GSA.
That's so interesting because you forget to think about, like, teachers too are LGBTQ. Like, it's not just the students, it's the teachers, it's your colleagues, you know, that need this respect and support as well. Sorry, Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, I will try to be quick. You know, I think that it's so important because if we see the policies now, right, all the don't say gay bills that are coming up, right, in states outside of New Jersey, I think we're super lucky that we have curriculum mandates in New Jersey that are saying we have to implement LGBTQ curriculum and stuff like that. However, like, if we don't talk about the history, we're going to continue to repeat these problems, right? And incorporating LGBTQ history into the curriculum, into the classroom, requires us to learn that this is a battle we have been fighting 60, 70, 80 plus years, right? And for me, I remember a moment in one of my undergraduate classes learning about things like the lavender scare that happened in like the 50s and 60s, where LGBT employees were fired from their jobs, where teachers were fired from their jobs for being gay, right? I didn't learn that until I was in my 20s, right? I feel like that's information that's so pertinent and so useful, right, to incorporate into lessons, right? Not only in history classrooms, because I agree that that's part of the problem, but incorporating it into everything, right? Literature, math, science, art. There are so many ways that we can tell these stories that ultimately validate the existence, I think, of LGBTQ people too, because you know, a lot of the time I hear elders, especially who maybe don't, you know, have a lot of information or don't have exposure, say things like, you know, the younger generation is so queer, like, why is everyone gay now, and things like that. Well, I think part of that reason is because we erase the history, right? We didn't include it in schools. We intentionally leave it out. And so I think it's our responsibility to include it, right? To create sort of a legacy, a long-standing legacy, because us here, we're doing great work, but there's so many ancestors that are missing, right, from the conversation, I think.
We lost, like, you know, an entire generation of AIDS, like,
right,
you know, of elders.
Right. Yeah. I'm just going to piggyback off of what you were saying, Alex, which is like that idea of like erasure and invisibility versus visibility now. Like there's a quote from Adrienne Rich that I like to start trainings with, which is like something to the effect of, when someone with the authority of a teacher describes the world and you're not in it, you have a moment of psychic disequilibrium, as if you looked in the mirror and saw nothing, right? And this is, I think, like a really concise way to sort of put like exactly what you were saying, as to like, you know, showing students the window in the mirror. And there's also, to your point, political reasons to teach LGBTQ history right now. Like, as we know, history writ large, queer history, Black history, et cetera, is under attack with legislation around with CRT. And attacking history is like a tale as old as time. This is a political tool. This has been used for you know, many, many years iteratively. So actively teaching LGBTQ history is a way to not only like provide a counter narrative, but to do so also with agency, right? Like in telling our own stories outside of the sort of defensive posturing that we were put into as positionally with conservative political rhetoric, et cetera. Instead, being positioned like as the actors in our own stories and the protagonists, even if you know, those are stories of erasure. And there's something to the like rehumanization of queer history too, right? Like to your point about Kristyn, the sort of silence in the archives around HIV/AIDS, that absence, right? You know, people dying of AIDS in the 80s or 90s, their families then going through their possessions, maybe finding photos of men with other men, women with other women, and feeling so ashamed that they toss all of that like beautiful history out, right? So there's true loss in the queer historical record. And that's, I think, sometimes reflected in the existing curriculum. And it's why I think projects like Queer Newark, oral history, for instance, are so important, because to show those, those primary sources to base curriculum off of, the raw materials of history, historic sites, museums, interpretive centers. Like, we need all of that stuff in queer historiography in order to show students true representations of themselves, right?
Yeah, and we, like, for Queer Newark, and since you mentioned it, like, we have everything online, like, and we hope that educators will go to our site and curate some stuff for their students, because it's not just LGBTQ plus history, but it's local New Jersey history too, and it's intersectional. So because LGBTQ people aren't just one identity, like, they are different races, different genders, different abilities, different ethnicities, religions, etc. And like, that is reflected, I think, in our collection. And I'm sure there's other oral history collections out there that teachers can use. Reggie, I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, I just want to add that I'm just reminded of people like Rodney Gilbert. Rodney Gilbert lived, existed, and has done so much for the city of Newark. I'm reminded of individuals like Marsha P. Johnson, New Jersey native, who deserves to be reflected in our education system. And I think that for the longest, we have erased those individuals from being taught. And unfortunately, education from a broader lens has been taught primarily from the white, cisgender, wealthy perspective. And that's not real education. And we've learned that history has shown, when you are teaching about LGBTQ individuals, that it combats misinformation, it fights against biasness against LGBTQ students and individuals. So, that's why it's important that we teach LGBTQ and inclusive education in our school system. So, these people exist. Kristyn, you exist. Alex, you exist. Danielle, you exist. I exist. We've done a lot for our community. And oftentimes we've seen that we contribute so much to society, and society, even today, shut the door on us. And that's just not fair. But we keep loving, we keep giving back to our communities. And that's why we need to teach this in our school system. And I'm sorry to get all emotional and passionate about it, because, when I was on the board, I strongly debated with a lot of people on the importance of teaching LGBTQ. And this was during a time when, we didn't have a Governor Phil Murphy. This was when we had Chris Christie in office. And it was like, you're wrong. This is not what you should be doing. You should be talking about, reading, writing, arithmetic. You know how our community can be in the city of Newark. So, that's why I'm passionate about this. And that's why we should be doing it.
Thank you. Lana, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add quickly, kind of just tying in and echoing what everyone else has kind of already said. It's also, it makes the classroom, the teachers, the relationships between the students and also the students, it makes everything much more real when you're including LGBT history, because not only can the students see themselves, but it also opens up a pathway for the teachers to be very much more themselves. And there's kind of a dissociation with some students and teachers. I mean, my students have come to me sometimes and be like, Ms. V, I don't really know this teacher. Like, I don't understand who they are. They haven't shared much of who they are with me. And I think having that ability to just share who you are with your student and for them to connect, it already creates and builds a connection for them to feel comfortable enough and to see you as a very real person. You're not just a teacher, but you're also a mentor, you're a community partner, you're a mother, you're a sister, you're so much more than just kind of this glossed over version of, hi, how are you? I'm a teacher and here's your test. And I think that's why LGBTQ history is so important, because not only does it break those intersectional barriers, but more importantly, it holds space for the students and the teachers and the community to just be one step closer to knowing who we all are and supporting each other through what is to come and the challenges that we will face in the future.
Yeah, beautifully said. I'm curious about those that are sort of like on the ground teachers, or even like if you've heard from other teachers that you know, like what is this like teaching LGBTQ plus history and contributions? Like what does it look like in practice? Like, do you have a lot of control over the creation of your lesson plans? Do you feel you have appropriate resources to do this work? And like, you know, where do you experience pushback? Is it more from administrators? Is it more from other teachers, or maybe like parents? Yeah, if anyone can speak to that.
I know that they just started doing it this year in our building because, of course, the last 2 years we were dealing with COVID and remote teaching. So for me, it was a beautiful thing to see, going down to the history department actually inviting me to speak to the students as one of the LGBT teachers in the building. I think I'm probably the only openly out teacher in this building, outside of one other. A lot of people have retired or left the building, but I was just amazed by the teachers teaching LGBT history. And I don't mean to toot my cousin's horn, but one of the history teachers is my cousin, my younger cousin. And, you know, just what she was teaching, you know, about people who, you know, who have influenced the LGBT community, been a part of the LGBT community. And I was just like, wow, like it's coming from my own family member. You know, my family is very open, you know, about, you know, everything and everyone, and loves everyone. And, you know, she actually helped out the older teachers with their lessons. So I'm unclear of the lessons that they have to teach, but I just know that she decided to teach these lessons where the kids were really digging in research on different, you know, people from the LGBT community. Like she was having them research it, she was having them write it, she was creating coloring pages. She was just having them do everything so that they understood what was going on. So outside of that, I know there was no pushback. Like the VP of that department came and asked, you know, where can we get resources from? So it's nice to hear that Rutgers has that and Queer Newark has it. So I'm going to actually pass on this information to the history department and the VP because they're looking for it. They want it. They want to embrace it and have it in our building. So there's been no challenges here with it so far.
I'm going to agree with that because I think your cousin likely had professional development from me and my coworkers.
Wow.
Yeah, I think we did a couple trainings with Jersey City. So like with Melissa DeSantos and like other folks there, Miss Lorraine, et cetera, put together the Pride calendar you were talking about with the different people. So it's so awesome to hear that it's being used, honestly, like just made my month and maybe year. But yep.
Oh, I would add that
sorry, Reggie.
I would add that a lot of pushback, what we see coming from some parents and the community at large, and it's based off of misinformation. Oftentimes we see, you know, individuals try to use, you know, propaganda, or people are using pornographic images to teach, you know, our kids LGBTQ curriculum, and that's the furthest from the truth. As we know that curriculum is developed at the school level. It's reviewed and vetted by the school administrators. It's voted on and by the board. And you know, examples that we can use is like, you know, gay marriage. The fight for gay marriage is a civil rights issue. The March on Washington was led and organized by, you know, someone I idolize and I love, and someone that has deeply grounded the work that I do each and every day, and it's Bayard Rustin. Again, as I mentioned, local heroes like Rodney Gilbert, who's very instrumental in educating kids to go on to Drew University and be educated in the city of Newark. That's why, you know, that's what we, you know, that's what we need to put out there. You know, unfortunately, these people exist. And I hate to keep echoing that, but, you know, that's what we're teaching. We're teaching that families and families are different, that families have two moms, two dads. Families just have a dad. And you know, those are examples you can teach and use it in mathematics or literature, just being creative, I would add.
Yeah, to Reggie's point, I really want to amplify that sometimes this work calls for creativity, for, good trouble, as I like to call it, because I've worked in schools where there have been pushbacks, particularly I've worked in charter schools, so not necessarily public schools, right, that have to follow state mandates. And because of that, charter schools sometimes have a little bit more leeway or a little bit more, you can do this, you can't do that. And I remember talking with my team and saying, I want to include this in my lesson plans and this in my lesson plans, and receiving that pushback. And for me, everyone can assess their own situation, but I felt as though, well, if they're going to push it back, then I'm going to sneak it in however I can sneak it in, right? And sometimes that means saying I'm doing a civil rights lesson and talking about Bayard Rustin, right? And dropping it in that he was LGBT. Now, when I present it out to staff members and things like that, it looks like a civil rights lesson. If they're not doing their own research, they're going to look over that stuff, right? For me, when I'm assigning, I used to teach English language arts for 7th and 8th grade. And, I would very intentionally pick literature written by LGBT authors and things like that, because, if I couldn't be so vocal about it within my school community, I still found ways to incorporate it within my curriculum, to kind of underline it throughout everything that we do. And so sometimes it does call for that strategic sort of, placement. And I think it really, unfortunately, requires some sort of, tricky navigation, but it's definitely possible, even if there is pushback.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. For me, considering that I teach at a private Catholic school, one would maybe assume that there is going to be pushback, and in some cases there has been. But where I found my most challenges is lack of resources, specifically for my school. So I have total and creative freedom when it comes to curriculum, which is incredible. But coming from somebody that it's their first year teaching, it could also be incredibly overwhelming. And I've come to find that my team and the people that do teach at St. Benedict's, whether it's history or English, sometimes with veteran teachers, they're a little stuck in their ways. They have their curriculum, it's set, it's worked for them for the past 20 years. And if it's broken, why fix it? So I've come to find that my largest challenge has been finding other educators and other teachers, and also just finding the time, like having them have time to sit down and talk to me and collaborate. I did this for this lesson during civil rights, or I talked about the AIDS crisis during this, or even during the propaganda and prohibition, and how we can also include LGBT history then. I think that's been my biggest challenge. Obviously the internet and great people like Alex, who's a good long lifetime friend of mine, has been able to support me. So just connecting with individuals and seeing their work, like having the Queer Newark History Project, I might not be able to have a 30-minute conversation with Kristyn, but her work is online, and interacting with that and pulling resources from that has definitely been so vital for figuring out just teaching after COVID, and then first year teaching, and being very intentional about what am I teaching, how am I showing up for my students, and how am I impacting them moving forward.
That's, yeah, so true. And I want to take a moment to answer a question that we got through here from an audience member. Dr. Mary Rizzo said that I really appreciated Danielle's comment about wanting to do what she needed to do to make her classroom a safe space. But I also worry when it's up to individuals to do that work because we get burned out, right? Or we get a new job and we move on, all those kinds of things that can happen. So how do we make sure these changes become part of the structure of the school so they don't disappear as easily?
Well, I think that's, sorry.
No, Lana, you can go after you.
Okay. I think that speaks to kind of the major issue right now that we're seeing with the LGBTQ plus mandate in New Jersey, where there's this mandate to teach LGBTQ history, but there's no board to make sure that it's being done properly, or it's being done to a level where us as teachers and as community members, and even the board is like, okay, this is great, this is what we want to see. So I think that's a major issue there in terms of just ensuring not only that we have this mandate, but we have people that are holding public schools and teachers and administration and everyone else included accountable to what should be considered excellent curriculum.
I can kind of answer that question and I'm trying to answer that question because I am, I've been in my building for about 21 years, but I am going on a year sabbatical. So I've been very concerned about the students in this building. And after seeing, that the history department is taking this on and taking on this interest and wanting this to be taught and to bring in different organizations, I feel bad for leaving, but it's something that I have to do. So I've decided to start talking to other teachers, one like my cousin, to make sure that we continue in this practice so that, in June, when Pride comes up for us, that we're doing the things that we need to do. But I've also expressed to my principal, my VP, and to the teachers that, for me, we shouldn't just be celebrating Pride 1 month within this building. We shouldn't be celebrating, Black history for 1 month in a building. It's Jersey City. We have so many cultures, so much diversity and within Jersey City that we should be celebrating it all, So I am trying to push for them to make this something that is not just occurring during this month. The month is short. It's a month when our seniors graduate. We have prom. We have all this other stuff. And we need to make sure it's important. And it's not something that just comes and goes within a month or 2 weeks to celebrate it and it's gone, So with me leaving, I will be connecting, again, I have already sent out emails to Hudson Pride Connection Center to get them in here because we have plenty of new teachers where their classrooms do need to be safe spaces, where they need to do the training all over again from the board, from the top to, I heard someone say Miss Ruane. Miss Ruane is the best ever. She's our district supervisor. She loves any idea, anything that can help, anything that can make sure that our school environment and school community is safer and everyone is comfortable. So right now is just trying to get other teachers to be as open to take care of these students that are in our community or within the school, and also the teachers that are here. Because, some of the teachers are not as open as me. As an art teacher, I'm not the history teacher, I'm an art teacher. So of course, I'm not conforming to anything that someone has to say to me. So there are murals up of Frida Kahlo. There's murals up of Marsha P. Johnson, Freddie Mercury. Like there's stuff all over this building that I make sure that it's put in there, and I teach it in my classroom as we're talking, like Audre Lorde. Like these things are happening within my classroom so that my students understand. So that's my way of pushing it in to art. I mean, there's other different things that I do, but I want to do that, and I'm trying to help other teachers so that I know next year while I'm gone that it's going to continue to happen, especially if this is something that they want and they desire. They really want to do this training. So, if Queer Newark can help out, that would be great. We want it. We want it at, Henry Steiner High School. You are welcomed here. I will give you the information to who you need to speak to so that I know that this is going to continue here.
Yeah, I just quickly want to echo Danielle's point, like finding community, I think it is sustainability, right? Because sustainability is the key here. How do we make this work? Build community within your school, outside your school, nationally. Like there are so many teachers all over this country right now, LGBT people all over this country right now, doing this work, creating their own lesson plans, right? Collaborating together. And I think that when we take advantage of that community, right, we are much better off. Our students are much better off. Our families are much better off. And so like really, whatever it takes to build that, I think that's the work that has to happen.
I'm just going to piggyback off of what everyone has said and just agree across the board on building community to make it more, structural. And in also the sort of idea that we have to create a culture where people aren't afraid to ask for help, and that it's okay that people are at totally different starting points, right? Like it's okay if someone just is trying to get down and understand pronouns, the gender unicorn, like real 101 stuff like that is okay. And it is okay if an educator is empowered enough to teach an entire, queer studies class as an elective, right? And those help to create a culture where LGBT history is stewarded, like to Danielle's point, throughout the year instead of just in Pride Month. And the other thing is like fund mandates, to Lana's point, like fund them. They need money. They need, like, it is cold, hard cash that helps these things get off the ground, which is essentially what Lana said too. Like I see so many mandates come down the pipeline in genocide education, and they have to be funded. They have to have real muscle around them. Teacher trainings, paying teachers to develop local centric, intersexual, LGBT community or curriculum, paying subs, right, to go to PDs, giving time, space, support, money, power, respect, like really the same issues that plague education as a field are also, can also bleed into not building a supportive culture around things like mandates, and just having it sort of be another thing where teachers are tasked to do something that they are not supported to do. And so, trying to avoid that and instead create, to Danielle's points, these really inclusive cultures in schools and classrooms.
I'll add, LGBTQ folks, please run for office. Funding is only allotted at the board level. Please run for office. Please become superintendents, central office administrators, because that's the only way it's going to trickle down. Please run for office. It's so important.
Oh, go ahead, Alex. You were going to say something.
Yeah, to Reggie's point, I currently serve on a school board in Camden, and the conversations that we're having, right, the curriculum that we're choosing, the books, right, the decisions that we're making to put, like, to decide where our money is going, so powerful, right? And I think that, like, sometimes that means that us as educators, right, show up to board meetings, right, encourage families to show up to board meetings and advocate for this stuff, because a lot of the times, what I've seen on my board is that people want to do things, but don't know how, or haven't heard from the community. And so they think it isn't a need, right? And so I think that it's so important for us to continue to use our voice. Like, I will stop now, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think too, like, all of these are such great, like, practical, how can we help? How can we help teachers? How can teachers help each other? How can the administration help? Such great insight into that. And like us at Queer Newark, like, we're happy if there's educators in the audience, like, reach out to us, because we want to help. Like, the more I talk to friends who are teachers that are LGBTQ, and I hear, that they're facing issues, like, I think Mary Rizzo put in the chat, there's a teacher that was denied tenure for allegedly teaching LGBTQ plus curriculum. And there are people that I know that got in trouble for doing, like, pride events in their, progressive town in New Jersey, or students that are still being bullied in progressive, ostensibly like progressive towns. And so this is, like, so important. And I know the little Kristyn in me wishes I had all of you as my teacher, like when I was in high school. And grammar school, I would have felt so good and so safe and known my place in society too. That is, like, what happens in schools really sets the tone for our youth to become adults and to treat how they treat other people and what they understand about the way our society works. So I thank you all so much for doing this work, and I thank you for being here. It's 6 o'clock, so I'm gonna take us out, and I hope we continue this conversation, because I think that collaboration that you all were talking about, and that, like, shared information between each other is so important. So I'd love to, like, outside of this, keep having these conversations with you all. And thank you. I really thank you all. I thank everyone who joined as well. And Christina's been putting some events up in the chat, so make sure you check those out, especially like Newark Pride. Have to plug that. And Queer Newark is doing a walking tour during Newark Pride, I believe on the 13th. If you go to our social media, you can find it, and we'll tell you all kinds of LGBTQ plus history in Newark and take you around and have a good time. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Hope you all have a great, great night and happy Pride.
Thank you, everyone. Don't forget to follow us at Queer Newark. Thanks again.